Good evening and welcome into Sports Talk on a Budget. It is April 26th, year of our Lord 2025. Just finished up with the draft, 3 days of the draft, watched a lot of it, a lot of draft coverage over the last 3 days, a lot to digest, a lot of storylines, a lot of picks. Obviously, 257 picks, of course, are in the NFL draft, so a lot to break down. But before I do that, like I said, this is Sports Talk on a Budget. If you prefer the video version of this podcast, please go like and subscribe right down here on YouTube under Sports Talk on a Budget. Leave a comment with some of your favorite picks of the draft, some of your favorite moments, your reactions, things like that. Would love to see that as well. However, if you prefer the audio version, have a great, pretty darn good audio following as well, please go like and subscribe and listen to places like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music. Pretty much wherever you get your podcasts, we will be there. With all that being said, this show, I'm sure you know what it's going to be. The draft just finished up about an hour and a half ago. This is going to be my total draft recap. Going to go over the top storylines, really top storyline. And I'm sure if you've paid any attention to the draft the last 3 days, you know what the top storyline was. We'll dive into that right away. My second topic, I'm going to go over my top winners and losers, mostly teams, but also going to talk about a player who I thought was a loser in this draft as well. And then I'm going to give you my 5 favorite picks of the draft. 5 picks I thought were great value picks, great picks, where those players ended up with the team, kind of the team that picked them, and the opportunity they will get as well. So with all that being said, this is my full NFL draft reaction, recap, and everything. Let's go ahead and dive into the show. So, as you can imagine, like I said, my first topic is going to be the storylines of the NFL draft. And like I said, if you've been paying any attention to the NFL draft the last 3 days, there is one major storyline that came out from this draft, and that is going to be Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders, in most people's opinion, including mine, was the second best quarterback in this draft and was supposed to be the second quarterback taken in this draft. However, he was not that. He was the 6th quarterback taken all the way in the 5th round. Like I said, most people had him as the second best quarterback, probably the second quarterback taken. Some people had Jackson Dart going above him. So at the very worst, he was going to be the 3rd quarterback off the board. That did not happen. Now, talk going into the draft was a lot of teams and a lot of GMs and a lot of front offices around the league did not have a first-round grade on Shedeur Sanders. So in the days leading up to the draft, at least the beginning of this week, and then obviously going into Thursday night, there was a lot of consensus and a lot of kind of rumors that there was a possibility that Shedeur Sanders would follow the first round and not get drafted in the first round. So I wasn't completely shocked that he wasn't drafted in the first round. However, if you would have told me on Monday that Shedeur Sanders wasn't going to be picked until the 5th round on Saturday, I don't think I would have believed you. Actually, I know I wouldn't have believed you because there was no way I thought he would fall that far in the draft. Fall to the first round was believable. Fall to the 5th round and be the 6th pick in the 5th round and 6th quarterback taken in the draft, I would not have believed you. Now let's kind of look at this from a couple different angles. Let's look at this from the angle that the league was clearly trying to send a message to Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders. It became abundantly clear to me. Sorry, one sec here. It became abundantly clear to me and pretty much anybody who has a brain watching this, who has a brain and is unbiased watching this draft, that this became a personal message that the NFL, its owners, its GMs, its front offices across the league were sending a message, not just to Shedeur Sanders, but they were sending a message to Deion Sanders. What that message was, not exactly sure, but pretty much in a nutshell, what it came off to me was, hey, you know what? We saw kind of the attitude and the kind of the way you carried yourselves over the last 2 years. Rumors were around the league that he, not only at the combine, did not interview well, came off as kind of brash, cocky, arrogant a little bit at the combine. But even in the one-on-one meetings with teams, he didn't take a lot, about 5 or 6. A lot of rumors were coming out that he came off as arrogant and brash in those interviews as well. So here's a guy in Shedeur Sanders. He's only played for one coach his entire football life. I'm talking Pee-wee, high school, college. Deion Sanders has been his coach. Now, when that happens, there's probably a certain level of entitlement that comes along with it because Deion Sanders, one of the best players at his position in the NFL history and one of the best athletes in maybe North American history because of what he was able to do on the baseball field, including on the football field, of course, as well. So there's a certain level of entitlement, I believe, that came with that. And what the NFL owners and front offices are saying is that entitlement came out in spades, both in the combine interviews and in the one-on-one interviews with the GMs and coaches when he went on his top 30 visits. And so what I believe the message they were sending to Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders as a whole is, you know what? You're not above everyone else. I don't care what your last name is. I don't care how good of a prospect you are. And there was, people that were definitely split on how good of a prospect he was overall. But you're not going to waltz into this league and demand things and kind of act the way that you have or perceive to have acted and just get whatever you want. Just end up as a first-round pick. Just end up as a guy who's in line to be the franchise quarterback for the team that picks you. We're going to teach you a lesson, and that lesson is a lesson in humility. And that is the message that I believe the NFL was trying to send to Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders. Was it a message that was merited? I don't believe so. I think it was maybe a little too far. Now, if you've watched Colorado, Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders over the last 2 years in college, yes, there's been kind of a three-ring circus a little bit around that program. Now, did they have success this past year, winning 9 games when most people didn't think they would make a bowl game, including me? Yes, they did. And hats off to them. They had a really good season, and Shedeur Sanders was a huge part of that of them turning that program around and having a good season. But there was a lot of other things that came along with it. And I don't want to hear any of the outside noise. Oh, it's about his race. Okay, you know what? Who was number 1 quarterback taken? Number 1 overall in the draft? It was Cam Ward, a black quarterback. So it wasn't about that. What it was about, I believe, is the NFL wanted to send a message to both of those individuals, Deion and Shedeur Sanders, saying that you're not going to come in and run the show just because Deion, you were a great player at one point, doesn't mean you're going to come in and dictate things for your son. And they sent that message. And it didn't help that Shedeur Sanders was just a good NFL quarterback prospect. He wasn't a great prospect. If he was in last year's draft, he probably would have been the 7th or 8th quarterback taken in last year's draft, and that would have been justified. So, wasn't a great prospect. Came off as brash, kind of cocky and arrogant in both the combine and one-on-one interviews. Then the last 2 years, you've just seen that kind of circus in Colorado. Those are the things I believe led to him falling. Now, did he deserve to fall because of all those things? I don't think so. Like I said, I think this was a little bit of overkill by the NFL, but the NFL does what they do. This is what they do. They like to send messages to people. They like to let you know that, okay, you know what? You might have been the king on campus and the big man on campus in college and in other places, but you're entering our league now, and you're going to play by our rules, and you're going to, get in line with our rules and the way that we do things. He's not the first player that they've told this to, and he will definitely not be the last player that they've told this to. So for Shedeur Sanders, looking at this situation, like I said, I don't believe this should have been as nearly as harsh as it came off to be, that he ended up dropping all the way to the 5th round, and there was a personal message, I believe, sent by the NFL to him and his dad. But let's just look at Shedeur Sanders in the situation you're in now. You land in Cleveland in the 5th round. Cleveland took Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round. They also have Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco under contract, and then whatever the hell is going on with Deshaun Watson, I believe Deshaun Watson will not play another snap for the Cleveland Browns. He won't be healthy for week 1, so I don't think he'll play another snap for the Cleveland Browns. Now that the dust is settled, all the noise is over, everything's over, you've been drafted, you have a team, the situation you're in, if you just look at your competition for the starting job in Cleveland, you can be a player in this. You can be a player in this if you take the right attitude and you choose to use this as motivation for the success of the rest of your career. If you can choose to use this as motivation for the success of the rest of your career, you're better than Kenny Pickett probably. You're a better quarterback prospect than Dillon Gabriel. Joe Flacco is 40 years old, so he ain't going to be there very long. there's an opportunity that some point during this season, if not at the beginning of the season, you're the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And that is all you can ask for. That is all you can ask for, whether you're a first-round pick, fifth-round pick, last pick in the draft like Brock Purdy a few years back. That's all you can ask for is an opportunity. You have a really good opportunity to go in there and show that you are the best quarterback in that room. Take this moment and use it as motivation, just like guys in the past have, like a Brock Purdy, like a Tom Brady. The best player in NFL history was a sixth-round pick. He was taken after you were taken. He was taken a round after you were taken, and he used that as motivation to become the greatest quarterback of all time. Use that as motivation. I don't think it's on the cards for you to become the greatest quarterback of all time, but use this situation in this moment and these last 3 days to become the best player you can be. And like I said, you have an opportunity in Cleveland to compete for the starting job from day one because you're just as talented, if not even more talented than every other quarterback already in that room. So like I said, use this as motivation to become the best player you can be. If you decide to kind of wallow and kind of, pout a little bit and not use this as motivation, your career is going to head the other direction. And since you're a fifth round pick, you're not guaranteed a roster spot. You're not guaranteed to be on the 53-man roster on opening weekend of the NFL. So don't squander this opportunity. It may not have been as great of an opportunity as you have thought it would be. These last 3 days are probably nowhere near what you hoped for, probably was worse than your worst nightmares of this situation, but still, you have an opportunity to go in there, use this situation, use this moment to become a better player, a better person, and I believe you are the most talented quarterback in that quarterback room going in to the season and going into training camp. So go ahead and go in there, win the job, and be who you always said you can be, and use this as a stepping stone for your career to become better. So obviously that was the biggest storyline in the draft. We had other storylines, but just not enough time to go into them. But like I said, with Shedeur Sanders, should have probably been the second or third quarterback taken in this draft, was not. Let's move on from that. I thought that there was way too much talking about that and too much times when other players were drafted and had their draft moment where ESPN, ABC, and the NFL Network decided to steal the draft moment from those players and talk more about Shedeur Sanders not being drafted. I believe the coverage and the reaction around Shedeur Sanders not being drafted by all networks that were showing the draft were not great. I understand you were dumbfounded and surprised, just like the rest of us, that he wasn't drafted in the first couple of rounds. I understand that, but do not steal from these other players' moments. Do not belittle these other players that were drafted before him because he wasn't drafted. And that happened time and time again on all three networks. I believe it was unacceptable, and I believe that it shouldn't have happened. So be better, those three networks, when that kind of situation happens, because every player that gets drafted deserves to have their draft moment because they've worked their ass off just like Shedeur Sanders has to get to that moment and enjoy that moment. And they should not be criticized because a player you thought should have been drafted in that slot wasn't. So be better when it comes to that. When it comes to draft coverage, all three networks that had the draft this year and have had the draft for years now. We're off of that. Let's go ahead and get to actual draft breakdown and recap and reaction. I'm going to go ahead and give you my winners and losers. 3 winners, 3 losers. Most teams, but there is going to be a player in there, and we'll touch on him briefly because we've mostly just touched on him a lot. But still, let's go ahead and get to my winners and losers. We're going to go with the winners here first. My first winner is going to be the Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears have put all their chips on the table and have looked directly into Caleb Williams and Ben Johnson's eyes and said, what else do you need? What else do you need? First pick in the draft to get Colston Loveland, basically 1A or 1B when it came to tight ends in this draft with him and Tyler Warren. Great get there. Now you pair him with Cole Kmet. That's going to be a really good tight end tandem for Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams in this offense. But not just there. You go in the second round and get a great value pick in Luther Burden, who fell out of the first round. In the second round, another good wide receiver, speed guy, possession guy, a guy who can kind of take the top off the defense. So now you have Cole Kmet, Colston Loveland, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden. You have weapons galore. Great job with those first two picks. Third pick, you go ahead and get the Boston College offensive tackle, who was about the sixth or seventh ranked offensive tackle in this draft. You get him late in the second round, so now you get more protection for Caleb Williams as well. And just for good measure, in the third round, you go ahead and get Shamar Turner, the defensive tackle out of Texas A&M, who actually played really well in his time in Purdue before transferring to his hometown Aggies in Texas A&M. Great value pick, great pick there. I thought their first four picks, which I just listed there, boom, 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 grand slam, home run, knock out of the park for all of that. And like I said, with what the Bears have done in the free agency period and in the draft so far this offseason, is make sure that there is no way that Caleb Williams cannot succeed, because they have given him every single thing that he needs. Protection, check. Weapons, check. Coach, check. Everything, every single item that you need to succeed as a quarterback in the NFL, the Bears have given Caleb Williams, and I believe in Caleb Williams. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback for years to come. So this is a team and a player and an offense that I'm really looking forward to watching. You get down this island to the defensive coordinator. You get some good defensive pieces like Shamar Turner and other pieces in the free agency as well. This is a team that's on the up and up. And it's all there on the table for Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams to lead this team to places that they can be with the talent and the roster that they have now. Number two, it's going to be a homer pick. You see my hat, you see the flag behind me. My number two winner of this draft is the New England Patriots. And just like with the Bears giving Caleb Williams a bunch of help, the Patriots went into this draft and gave Drake May, their young franchise quarterback, a ton of help as well. What do you do with the first pick in the draft? Maybe a little bit higher than he was kind of slotted as far as rankings of players, but still, you take the best left tackle in the draft. I don't give a fuck about the short arms when it comes to Will Campbell. Guy's a dog. He was a first or second team All-SEC player all 3 years that he played. Started as a freshman at left tackle for LSU in the SEC and still became second team All-SEC and was two-time first-team All-SEC, including first-team All-American this last year. So he is an absolute dog. He's played a ton of snaps, a ton of experience. He's going to be a really good left tackle for the Patriots for years to come. But not just that. What do you do in the second round? You get probably the most explosive running back in this draft in Trevion Henderson, the running back from Ohio State. We all saw what he did throughout the season in the playoff. Every time this guy touches the ball, Trevion Henderson, he has a chance to go the distance. And not just that, he's one of the best pass-blocking running backs that I've ever seen come out of the college game. Great value pick there. Him and Ramondre Stevenson should be a really good 1-2 punch, and he should be a really good receiving and running weapon for this offense and for Drake May. And then you just keep on hitting. You get Kyle Williams, the wide receiver from Washington State in the third round. Speed guy who averaged 17 yards per reception. He had 14 touchdowns for Washington State last year, so super productive. Played with Cam Ward as well 2 years ago, had production 2 years ago as well. But speed guy, can take the top off the defense, good route runner. He's going to probably even learn more from a guy like Stephon Diggs. Really good value pick there with Kyle Williams, one of the better possession receivers and speed receivers in the entire draft. But you didn't stop there. At the end of the third round, you get the number one center in the entire draft in Jared Wilson, the center from Georgia. Unbelievable get there. He was a guy that was ranked in the top 50 for most people, whether it was Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks. Most people that you saw, he was ranked within the top 50 or right around there. You get him in the late 90s, in the late third round. You sign Jared Bradbury this offseason. He'll probably be your starter, so you can probably even put Wilson at guard. But your starting center for the years to come is gonna be Jared Wilson. Great pick there. He was an absolute dog at Georgia as well. And then finally, what do you do in the fourth and fifth round? You get two value picks, and Joshua Farmer, the defensive tackle from Florida State, and Braden Swinson, the defensive end from LSU. Two guys ranked within the top 100 by pretty much everybody out there who is ranking the top 100 prospects. You get them in the mid-150s and 140s. Unbelievable value there. Great job by Elliott Wolf. Great job by Mike Vrabel on this draft. I think they did a really good draft. Yes, this is a homer pick for me, but I believe they knocked it out of the park with this draft. Good value at a lot of positions. You got depth on the defensive side, and then you got needs on the offensive side at tackle, wide receiver, running back, basically, and at offensive line as well. So great job for Mike Vrabel and Elliott Wolf and Drake May. Like I said, with Caleb Williams and the Bears, they're making sure that they're going to give you everything you need to be successful. So it's on you. I believe in you, and I believe you have the capability to take this team to where it needs to be. And then my third winner in this draft is going to be the Baltimore Ravens. And the Baltimore Ravens just do what they do in this draft. They get good value players. They get players that fit their system. They get players that are productive. And when you look at them and you hear them and you see them and you just kind of like, okay, well, what team would I pair this player with? The Baltimore Ravens are usually the first, second, or third team you think about. Starting with their first round pick, Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. He was the number one safety in the draft, and you can't go wrong taking defensive players from Georgia. He is going to be probably a plug-and-play starter from day one for this Baltimore Ravens team. Great pick there, great value. He dropped to the end of the first round. Safety isn't the most important position or most needy position in the NFL, so that's why he dropped a little bit, but great value there getting Malachi Starks. Then what do you do in the second round? Later in the second round as well, you get Mike Green, the defensive end from Marshall, the guy who led the entire Division I FBS college football league last year in sacks with 17.5 sacks. Mike Green, yes, he's had a little bit of a checkered past. Supposedly has gotten off of that and should be fine, but you get him into a locker room, into a culture like the Baltimore Ravens, led by John Harbaugh, led by Lamar Jackson, led by a lot of veterans inside that locker room. They'll be able to kind of bring him in and be like, hey, lean on us, be about ball, only worry and talk about ball and your family, and that's it. Don't worry about anything else, nothing else. It's just about this. They'll bring him into that locker room. They'll bring him into that culture, and I think he'll be just fine. Probably couldn't have gone to a better spot. Only a few other spots he could have gone to, in my opinion, that would have been better or just as good. And then in the third round, you go ahead and get Emory Jones, the right tackle from LSU. You have Ronnie Stanley on the left side as your left tackle. Now you got your right tackle in Emory Jones, a guy who started along that offensive line for LSU for 3 years with Will Campbell. So him and Will Campbell were the bookends on that offensive line for LSU. So you get a guy with a ton of experience, a ton of production, and you don't have to worry about him playing left tackle because you got Ronnie Stanley. So he's going to move. He's going to stay at right tackle like he did in college. So now you get another bookend tackle to protect Lamar Jackson as well. And then a pick that I like that they got, I believe was in the 5th round, was LeJohntay Wester, the wide receiver from Colorado as well. This guy was super productive. Everybody talks about Travis Hunter when they talk about wide receivers or they talk about any kind of receiving threat from Colorado. LeJohntay Wester was a guy who was super productive and underrated wide receiver. He's going to jump into that system with Lamar Jackson, with guys like Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman, and he's going to fit right in, and I think he's going to have a pretty productive career if he can stay healthy for that Baltimore Ravens team. So, like I said, whether it's Ozzie Newsome pulling the strings, whether it's DeCosta pulling the strings at GM for this Baltimore Ravens franchise, they seem to always have a really good draft, and they did it again. Love their picks. Malachi Starks, Mike Green, Emory Jones, and even Wester later in the draft as well. I think really good job from the Baltimore Ravens, and hats off to them for their draft and just being a team that knows what they need in the draft and knows what to go after. And then sometimes maybe it's not a position in need, but he's the best player on the board. Just fucking take him. And that's exactly what the Ravens did with Mike Green and maybe even Emory Jones as well. And then, unfortunately, when there's 3 winners, there's got to be 3 losers. And I won't spend a lot of time on my first loser because we spent a ton of time on him at the opening of the show. But let's be honest, the biggest loser of this draft weekend was Shedeur Sanders. Was supposed to be the second quarterback taken overall, at worst third. Supposed to be late first round, early second round at the worst. Falls to the 5th round. Has to compete with another rookie quarterback from day one in Dillon Gabriel. So he is the biggest loser of this draft. But like I said, he can use this moment to make his career better, just like guys in the past have, whether it was Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, Dak Prescott, I mean, Kurt Warner and Tony Romo went undrafted. So use this moment like those guys did as the moment that changes your career for the better. So that was my first loser of this draft. My second loser was the New Orleans Saints. The New Orleans Saints, I just thought was kind of just kind of a weird draft for me. Kelvin Banks was their first pick at 9 overall. I liked Kelvin Banks. He was my second or third tackle in this draft, but 9 overall was a little bit of a reach there. I thought there was other guys they could get at that time, but they get Kelvin Banks because Mbembu and Will Campbell were already off the board, so maybe like, okay, let's just get the best tackle. It's a position in need. I get it, but still good, not great pick there. But this is more about their second and third picks. You take Tyler Shuck in the second round. And Tyler Shuck was probably a top 5 or 6 quarterback in this draft because that was how weak this quarterback draft was. But Tyler Shuck has played 7 years in college, is currently older, and obviously he's going to stay older because he's not going to get any younger, is older than players like Trevor Lawrence and Brock Purdy. Yes, Brock Purdy, who's going into his 4th season in the NFL, and Trevor Lawrence, who's going into his 5th season in the NFL. Tyler Shuck is older than both of them. And if you look at his career, whether it was at Oregon, whether it was at Texas Tech, and then this past year at Louisville, his really only productive year was his last year, his 7th year at Louisville, and you take him in the second round over guys like Shedeur Sanders, Kyle McCord, other guys I thought were better fits and better players at the quarterback position, and you take Tyler Shuck in the second round. Don't like that pick at all. Don't understand what you're doing there. Still don't understand what the situation is with Derek Carr. Is he injured or does he just not want to be in New Orleans? Either way, what a mess for Kellen Moore and that New Orleans organization. They didn't get any better this past week. They didn't get any better in this draft, in my opinion. And then I do like one of their last picks, Danny Stutzman, who was one of my top 5 linebackers. Guy who I think is underrated. I think that was a good pick for them in the 4th round. But Vernon Broughton in the 3rd round I thought was an overdraft. The defensive tackle from Texas. Another overdraft for the Saints here. I thought they overdrafted for both Tyler Shuck and Broughton. I could be wrong, of course, but I just don't think either of those players were as good as where they were drafted. And then my final loser of this draft is going to be the Atlanta Falcons. And the reason I have the Atlanta Falcons as as my third loser is I did like their first pick, Jalen Walker. You get the linebacker defensive end from Georgia, really good pick there. Then you get your second pick, and it's James Pierce. And James Pierce, I think, is a guy who could be a good player in this league. He needs some help. There's some character issues there. There's some doesn't love football issues a little bit there. His production really did fall off this past year at Tennessee, but it's not because of James Pierce. It's because of what it took to get back into the first round and get James Pierce. Not only did you trade your second round pick in this year's draft to get back in the first round, you traded next year's first round pick. And the Rams probably picked up that phone and were like, huh? What? You want to do what? And then they're like, yeah, of course. Let's do it. Let's do it right now. And so don't like that at all. James Pierce was a guy you probably could have gotten maybe in the second round where you were at in the second round. If not, you trade up earlier in the second round and just move picks and maybe move a third or a fourth. But the fact that you had to trade your second round pick and you had to trade your first round pick next year to get into the mid-20s to take a guy who probably would have been available at the top of the second round, that's not a good sign there. And with a team that I think has a lot of needs, especially on the defensive side and also along the offensive line as well, you had 5 total picks, and 2 of those were in the first round. And now you don't have a first-round pick next year. So you're going to have to acquire a first-round pick next year or not pick next year until the second round. So don't like the future of this Falcons team. If Penix can be the guy, then it doesn't matter. If Penix is great, then it doesn't matter. But still don't like this. Terry Fontenot, their GM, just has made questionable decisions from paying Kirk Cousins to then turning around and taking Penix with the 8th overall pick to what they did this year. So really questionable front office decision-making in Atlanta continues. And I just thought trading your second round and your first round pick next year to move into the mid-20s for a guy who would still be around in the early second round and having only 5 total picks and no first round pick next year, I just don't like the situation that Atlanta's in, and I think it could get real, real bad for Atlanta if they don't have a winning season this year and don't get to the playoffs. Now, what I wanted to do with my last segment here is my top 5 picks in this draft. I'm going to give you my top 5 picks. These are my favorite picks, the value of where these guys were picked, the teams that they went to, the fits, Let me go ahead and give you my top 5 picks in this draft. And number 1, we're going in the first round. We're going with the 14th overall pick, and that is Tyler Warren to the Indianapolis Colts. Tyler Warren is a Swiss Army knife. He's the second most versatile player in this entire draft behind Travis Hunter. He's a guy that did everything and was basically the entire offense outside of the running backs for that Penn State team. It was their entire passing offense pretty much. You go to a team like the Indianapolis Colts who desperately need weapons, but desperately need versatile weapons. They have 2 quarterbacks that I don't believe are starting quarterbacks in the NFL at this time, and Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. But you give them a guy who's versatile and can do many things like Tyler Warren, and that really can help them develop and be better and kind of get the best out of their offense. So I really like that pick. Number 14 overall to the Colts, Tyler Warren, one of my favorite picks of the entire draft. My second of my top 5 favorite picks of the entire draft is the number 44th pick to the Cowboys, and that is Donovan Azaruko, the defensive end from Boston College, a guy who was second in the nation only behind Mike Green in sacks in the FBS last year. This was a guy I thought should have been a first-round pick. I thought his production, his measurables was first-round pick worthy. He falls to the middle of the second round to that 44th pick there. And now you look at this defensive line for the Dallas Cowboys. You have Micah Parsons and Ezeraku on that defensive line as your bookend defensive ends. They're going to get after guys like Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. That's going to be interesting to see. Jackson Dart maybe in the future for the Giants. I really like that. I really like that pick for the Cowboys there. The Cowboys actually had a sneaky good draft. Didn't kind of take a lot of sexy picks, but took good players who are going to start for their team and be good value players for their team. So Donovan Azaruko at 44 to the Dallas Cowboys, I thought was a really good pick there. Then we're going to go to my number 3 pick. And give me a sec here. I got to find my number 3 pick. Actually, we'll go to my number 4 pick, and we're going to get back to my Patriots here, and we're going to talk about Jared Wilson, the number 1 center in the entire draft for most people. Actually, I don't know if I saw anybody not have him as the number 1 center in the entire draft. And he goes at the 95th pick to the Patriots. He's a guy, I think, if you don't play him at center, you could probably play him at guard to start off his career. He will be your starting center going forward. He will be the guy that is going to be your center snapping the ball to Drake May for years to come for that offense. Really good value pick there. Jared Wilson was a guy, like I said, if he played tackle and was as good of a tackle as he is of a center, he would have been a first-round pick, but he wasn't. He was a center, not the most sexy or needy position in the draft. So that's why he falls to the 3rd round and late of the 3rd round and almost out of the top 100. But number 95th overall pick to the Patriots, Jared Wilson, was one of my favorite picks in the entire draft. My next most favorite pick in the entire draft, I touched on this in my winners earlier, and that is going to be Mike Green to the Baltimore Ravens. Mike Green, we've talked about it, led the FBS in sacks last year for Marshall, 17.5 sacks, super productive guy. Yes, checkered past, but you put him in a locker room like the Baltimore Ravens and a culture there, I think they'll be able to get him on the straight and narrow, and he's going to be super productive. There's still a ton of talent on that defense that he's just going to make even better from day one. I think he starts for the Ravens from day one and has production right off the bat. So Mike Green at the number 59 pick is one of my favorite picks in the draft. And my final favorite pick of the draft is going to be the 166th pick. 166th pick. 66th pick. And that is going to be in the 5th round. And that is going to be wide receiver Torrey Horton from Colorado State. This was a guy, if he had transferred last year to a bigger school, played at a Power 4 program, would have probably been a 1st or 2nd round, probably 2nd or 3rd round pick, or late 2nd round, early 3rd round, or even mid 2nd round. Really good route runner, good hands, big guy, a really good player there. And Torrey Horton was super productive for Colorado State, even though they didn't have great quarterback play. And he was pretty much their best offensive player by far. But he falls to the Seahawks there. He can kind of fall into that DK Metcalf mold. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say he's as good as DK Metcalf, but similar player, big guy, strong guy, good hands, good ball skills, better speed than you think as well. So now you have Jackson Smith and Jigba. They took another wide receiver in the draft. I'm blanking on him right now as well. But you have Jackson Smith and Jigba, and now you get Torrey Horton out there with him. I think that could be a really good pick and really good player for the Seattle team. So I love that pick for the Seattle Seahawks, number 166 overall pick Torrey Horton the wide receiver from Colorado State, is one of my favorite top 5 picks in this entire draft. That has been my recap of the draft. I will be going live tomorrow night on From the Sidelines NFL with the boys and with Monique over there, talking all things draft. We'll recap, react to the draft and everything as well. So go check that out on the Sports Fluent Network if you have a chance tomorrow, going live at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you again for watching and listening to this podcast here. This is Sports Talk on a Budget. If you like the video version, please like that and subscribe to the podcast here on YouTube. Smash that like, smash that subscribe. However, if you prefer the audio version, that's fine. Go ahead and like and subscribe to channels like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for watching and listening, like I said, and have a great weekend.